I am the mayor of the city of LaPorte and have had the opportunity to serve the citizens there since January of 2012. My previous life was, I was active duty Navy before moving back to my hometown, and spent 2.5 years on a destroyer and then a year on an oil platform in the North Arabian Gulf, and then a couple of years at the Pentagon doing acquisition and budget management before transitioning as a defense consultant and then being called back to serve my home community. Some of my background in military, and particularly in the acquisition world, was something that I draw on routinely as I work with Bert, and understanding the importance of confidentiality and releasing pertinent details in a timeline that is appropriate to the specific projects. And we try and be as transparent as possible amongst government, and one of the great opportunities that we have with the Greater LaPorte Economic Development Corporation, which Bert serves as the Economic Development Director, or serves as the Executive Director of, is that they serve as a public-private partnership entity, and they allow for that opportunity for us to be able to react to businesses' requests for confidentiality, to follow their timelines on their specific projects. That is so key in so many different areas of economic development, that is one of just many different areas that the GLEDC role is so pivotal. And Bert also helps serve in coordinating a lot of different efforts across the different entities of the city, of the Redevelopment Commission, the Urban Enterprise Association, and many other different organizations, that we try and have that collaboration, just as when you mentioned before, of all these different entities, and GLEDC helps kind of coordinate a lot of those different entities. He'll talk a little bit more about some of those specifically, but that kind of gives just a little bit of background from a city perspective of why it's so important to have that private element that is involved with all of our economic development aspects. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bert, and he'll do his introduction.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the intro. Again, my name is Bert Cook. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater LaPorte Economic Development Corporation. I'm going to take just a minute here to explain how we're set up, and then I have some other comments on how we do business. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, and as the Mayor said, we're both publicly and privately funded. It's about 2/3 public and 1/3 private, and that varies from year to year. But I think that's an important component of how our organization is set up, in that we definitely have the buy-in from the private sector in the Greater LaPorte area, which is key in many respects. We're governed by an 18-person board of directors that's made up of about 50% being private industry representatives, and the other half being appointments both from the mayor and our Chamber of Commerce, which provides the link between GLEDC and the Chamber of Commerce, and links back to the existing business base. Now, as I tried to formulate my comments in having a limited amount of time, and hopefully giving you some information that you can take away that is valuable, what I noted as an important key to the successes that we've had and changes that have occurred in the way we do business over the last 10 years or so, one thing kept popping up, and that's the communication that occurs between GLEDC and the elected bodies that serve the city of LaPorte. And what I mean by that is, in many cases, it's a city council, it's a county council, a redevelopment commission that is making decisions on projects that we're bringing to them on what direction we're going to go in attracting business or retaining business. And the change that I've seen that I think is important to note is, or at least the change that we've enacted that has had a significant impact, is the focus on communication throughout the entire process. So many of the projects that we work, last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years in the entire site selection decision-making process. And in years past, we may have engaged a council or a redevelopment commission at the latter stages of that timetable. And since Mayor Milo has taken over, we've put a value on engaging those groups earlier in the process. It's had a significant impact in our successes and also just the way that we do business. I think it's essential to note that when we talk about incentives, which is a major part of every project that we work, we lose track of. There's a value, a monetary value to an incentive on a project, but there's also a value to the way in which that incentive is applied to a project. Communities make a statement, whether they know it or not, as to their support for projects in the way that they apply those incentives. I think we've all probably heard or been a part of situations where a company may come before a council in search or with the desire to be given an incentive package, and there's extensive discussion and voting non-unanimously in terms of whether or not you're going to move forward on that project. And there's a detriment, there's a statement that's made, and there's a detriment to each one of those projects when those type of discussions occur in a public forum. So we've tried to counter that by engaging our elected bodies earlier in the process, giving them the opportunity to ask questions, to vet any issues that the counselor might have, just overall to make sure that they have a comfort level with what we're asking them to do with the company that is asking for the use of that incentive, and it's worked. I think it's worked very well. There are confidentiality issues that exist, and we recognize that. I think your economic development people will generally tell you that we can work around using company names or using specifics that may violate a confidentiality agreement or the confidence that the company has in sharing that information. So by doing that, I think we get the buy-in a lot earlier from the elected body, and we've heard over and over that the way we've streamlined the process and the way it is handled in LaPorte is a model for how companies would like to see it handled elsewhere. So we're pretty proud of that process that we've put into place, and I think there's a significant value to that. So as I thought about what I might say to you today that would be beneficial, I think that maybe the takeaway from my comments are to put some thought into the dialogue that goes on both with your elected body and with your probably more succinctly with the companies that are actually approaching your community. So I think I'll give it to Bruce now. Okay.
Well, you can tell I'm a former mayor. I feel like I got to stand up and be seen, right? My background to get here into the economic development field is probably a little different than most people take. My background, I'm a retired police officer from the city of Portland. I had the privilege of serving on the city council for 8 years, and certainly had the ultimate privilege of serving my community as mayor of the city of Portland for 8 years. And it was interesting seeing some of those pictures of those basketball contests on there between IU and Purdue. I also had the privilege of being a Division I college basketball official for 11 years, and I worked the Big Ten, the MAC, so I got an opportunity to be part of that process. But I think ultimately those different opportunities that I had in my professional life, I think has really helped me step to the next level. And I think it come full circle, if you will, to the economic development component that I now represent in Randolph County and within our region of East Central Indiana. I think it's really given me the opportunity to recognize and see the value of whatever role you have in your county, whether you're a county elected official, county councilman, county commissioner, whatever the circumstance of economic development, you all have a very, very important role to play in your economic development approach in your county. And it's very, very important that you understand that role and work within that role and work in building those partnerships and those capacities with the economic development directors, the mayors within your communities, whatever the circumstances may be. So often we talk about a lot of different type of approaches to economic development, but I can tell you, as a former mayor, and then stepping into the economic development role really helped me understand that how important it was as a mayor to build the financial capacity and the sustainability and stability in your community, how important it was to build your infrastructure component, your quality of life issues, because all of those things matter. And that's part of my responsibility as a mayor, to make sure that we had those strong elements in place, because they were a major contributor to the overall economic development success and sustainability of our county and our region. We were the county seat, so that made it even more prevalent. And every decision we made, whether it was potentially a TIF district, whether it's downtown revitalization, historic preservation, all of those things played a key role in economic development within our county. And we needed to understand clearly how that was going to affect whether the rest of the county, whether it's the school system within our county. So all of those components matter. And I think that's one thing that really helped me transition into the economic development role, was my role as a city councilman, and then 8 years as a mayor really helped me understand how important those different components were. And so often you see, we talk about being able to build those partnerships and networking with and building credibility with those individuals we believe can bring value back to what it is we're trying to accomplish, whether it's in our communities or within our counties, are very important. So often you'll see differences within your own county. Maybe city government doesn't get along with county government, or county government vice versa the other way, or there's an issue with their economic development person. And I would challenge each of you in this room today to take a step back, whatever your role is in your county, especially if you're an elected official. Understand that role as you're there in a community serving manner, not in a self-serving manner. And I think when you're able to really dial into that and understand that, take a step back and understand how important it is to build those relationships with the cities and towns, and vice versa the other way, and how important it is to get to know your economic development leaders and directors within your community. Because I know in Randolph County, 95% of the funding source comes from edit dollars to support economic development causes and initiatives in Randolph County. So it's very important to build those relationships of credibility, if you will, with those officials who help fund that entity. It's very important to do that. One thing we're looking at within Randolph County is balancing that financial approach to economic development. I think that creates a healthier organization going forward. And we all know if you put all your eggs in one basket, sometimes that can be a difficult challenge if that basket gets spilled, so to speak. So we want to make sure we're having that long-term sustainable success from a financial component within Randolph County is what we're really working on, because we really believe, we keep talking, I keep stressing this to the board and officials, if we're going to be externally strong in Randolph County, we got to be internally strong. And again, that goes back to building the financial capacity and the success of what you do financially, and also building that infrastructure capacity. And quality of life issues are very important. They all play a major role in the success of your communities when you're trying to move it forward. And the one thing too to understand, I think is very important for all officials, is that we are in a global market. And we need to understand that economic development goes far beyond your own county or city and town's boundaries. And to understand that it's important that, the one thing as the mayor of the city of Portland I try to do was work very closely, not only with our local leaders, but also our leaders on the state level, the federal level, and internationally. Because I think it's important, whether you're a leader in your community, to understand all those different branches and all those different entities, how they work and how they feed into what it is you're trying to do every day and create a value within your community or within your county. So it's important to understand, because I promise you what's going on at the federal level and the state level is going to trickle down. It's going to have a major impact and effect on what's going on our local level. So it's very important to build your intellectual capacity, if you will, to understand how those different elements of government and how those folks can really help you when you bring them to the table as part of that potential partnership on a particular initiative. So it's very, very important. Again, to me, a lot comes back about building credible partnerships and relationships along the way, and making sure that you are preparing your community at the highest level you possibly can. So when and if that potential opportunity comes knocking, you're ready to open that door and step in and take advantage of the opportunity that's been presented to you. So we're working hard every day to do that. Hopefully we'll have a chance to add some more things to it, but it really, from my perspective, again, stepping in out of the elected official role and into economic development, I think was a much easier transition for me, and I certainly don't profess to have the knowledge economic development-wise that somebody like Corey would have, or Lee, or whoever, but certainly I think that my background lends a lot of credibility to the fact that we're able to understand how important it was to build that capacity within a community that has a major impact and effect on your economic development approach and initiative. With that, I'll pass it over to my good friend, the Honorable Larry Macklin.
Hey, thank you. He's about as good on the basketball court as he is on his feet, too. You did a pretty good job. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here. And right at the outset, I want to say maybe my comments a little bit more formal for what I've been asked to do. My opinions may not reflect all economic developers around the state of Indiana, but I've been asked to take a few minutes to offer my perspective on being a former state senator and how it may relate to my role as an economic development professional. And let me tell you at the outset that the two are not so very different. We are all in this game together, and that is elected officials and economic development leaders working together to help communities grow and hopefully have the appropriate tools necessary to make that happen. But that is sometimes where we often depart. Maybe a little more later on that issue. In economic development, the vast majority of citizens don't really understand what we do. And two, government may often expect more than what local economic development organizations or the LEDOs, the more than they can deliver. Economic development organizations were created, in my mind, to help the local and the region and state economy, and you've heard a little bit of this, through facilitating job growth and job retention. And we often differ on things like if repairing cracks in the sidewalks can be considered economic development when using economic development dollars. There's a difference of opinion throughout the state on that as well. Let's reflect for a moment, though. A few short years ago, the communities, when I was in the legislature, the communities and economic development folks were still severely pitted against one another to attract new business. And generally, the larger communities won out in those cases. It was a pretty sight. It was a bad sight to see neighbors fight among themselves. Excuse me, for the same jobs. Well, to help level the playing field, the legislature responded in many ways, and a couple of them over a few sessions by strengthening the work of the Indiana Department of Commerce, now the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, to assist communities. And some of you may remember the old competitive CFF, or Community Focus Funds, now, and the CDBGs, Community Development Block Grants. But for local economic development, such as for industrial parks, infrastructure, and incentives, the EDIT tax was created. Now today, a bit on the soapbox, we can use EDIT for anything that a community sees fits. Local professional EDCs were formed also, and slowly began to work together, much as Wendy talked about. They accepted that workers were more mobile, and businesses attracted workers from multi-counties. And today we are far more global, and we recognized even more that we needed to work together regionally to attract business both domestically and internationally. Much like, again, Wendy said, in Northeast Indiana, we created the Northeast Indiana Regional Partnership Organization. It's about 6, maybe now 7 years ago. It's a consortium of 10 counties working together to advance our region to the world. Many other areas have endorsed regional efforts as well, and Wendy spoke well of it. The governance is by Regional Opportunities Council, or the ROC, As we know it, the 10 LEDOs formed their own LEDO Council, and I'll stack that organization up against any others for working together with a solid code of ethics agreement that everybody signed, standing side by side. Also under the regional partnership umbrella is a Mayor's Commissioners Caucus, and they, with similar regional goals and all signing a code of ethics as well, standing side by side. And an additional Northeast Indiana entity was created for legislative matters, the Northeast Indiana Chamber, and they too are a party to that same code of ethics. The regional cooperation, you see, and the efforts are working very well, and in doing so adds credibility to the individual member counties. It is economic development organizations and government working together at its very best. And that cooperation, folks, in my mind, is recognized across the country and in some international arenas as well. It's a powerful statement. Now, the legislature listened to other constituencies oftentimes and did things like putting tax caps on the greatest local revenue source, the largest local revenue source, and putting that language in the state constitution. Back on the soapbox, Bruce. With local funding sources depleting, local units have begun to look for ways to cut budgets and services. And what am I telling? I'm preaching to the choir. Local units are generally not motivated, though, to raise other local taxes, while others may have already maxed out those local taxes as well. And remember, to that extent, the legislature decided that local edit funds can now be used for anything not related to economic development. But it was the local units that had asked for that authority in order to have funds to replace lost revenues. They formed a good partnership there between local and the state in that case. There are those that would add to this discussion, though, that the legislature was created to reflect the needs of the state, not necessarily solve all the issues of local units. And that's what we hear from the inside looking out. On the other hand, let's not be too hard on the Indiana General Assembly. For the most part, the body has always served the state quite well. It is one part of a tripartite system of government. I'm not going to get into history, where all three, though, must work together with the checks and balances to make the state work. Members of the General Assembly are not full-time legislators, and we can't forget that. Most still have jobs at home. It's called a citizen legislature. However, it is becoming more and more full-time work beyond the session each year. There are study committees, constituent works, and other demands, at least something almost every day. And please understand that economic development, though, is not the only issue, and I fully understand that. A legislator, maybe I think it ought to be, but a legislator has a lot to balance between voters and local units and constituent groups. And while they all serve plus or minus the same number of people across the state, a rural legislator may have as many as 7 counties in a district with over 20 communities all vying for a project of some need. It's a struggle. But remember, a good quality of a legislator is to know when to lead or when to reflect his or her district. And I also have a philosophy that when the election is over, it's over, and it's then that the time to do the business of the people should prevail. And folks, the system can work. But today, there are even more so today, there are so many single-purpose issues sometimes that take up so much time and energy that unfortunately some of the other work of the General Assembly does not receive sufficient time necessary to craft meaningful legislation. There is often no time for debate. It's not easy to shepherd a bill through and see it enacted. So as a former legislator, where am I going with this? I can say that the job of professional economic developer is not a lot different. It is often too easy to say, though, let's just call the EDC or the Economic Development Office and they can take care of the issue. We are a global society that has been discussed, whether you want to understand that or not. We can no longer work against our neighbors. Visioning is critical and all need to be in support. One community in a county has to work with the others in order to be successful. One county has to work with its neighbors as well. A prospective new business doesn't care about your old rivalries. In fact, they are looking for a solid and prepared workforce with good skills and work ethic. And a prospective new business doesn't want to hear how good you are over someone else. They want to know what you have to offer. Can you meet their specifications? And do you have the necessary prepared workforce? So in economic development, local units should not be pitted against one another by actions of the General Assembly that I have often argued. And many suggest that this is what Senate Enrolled Act 1, the business personal property tax issue, could create. Could create. A study committee will debate that question. Then 2, the new 20-year abatements will not be employed by all units. No business in my area insisted on these, but the vast majority of businesses that I've talked to said that sometimes they don't understand those debates. They're willing to pay their fair share of taxes. They want to be a part of a community. They want to be good corporate citizens. And speaking of abatement, it's unfortunately has become very regimental. I think my fellow economic developers say it's a given. It's no longer a strong incentive that is earned based upon investment. Is that good or bad? We do need to encourage and thank our businesses and industry for investment. There's no question about it. And remember, abatement is for new taxes. It is a tax phase-in, and sometimes the word is often referred to as part of the dirty word language. It is a tax phase-in. But now, communities have a leg up on their neighbors, those that employ the use of what we know as super abatements. So in a sense, I believe that we have almost come full circle. Communities may very well be pitted against one another again, and we can all lose because of that. Rest assured, local economic developers are going to work very hard not to let that happen. I'm very grateful for your patience. Thank you.